But I'll start by saying I was pretty nervous to do this, as I always am when I speak in front of a group. And I told my mother, and she said, if there's one thing you're good at doing, it's talking. So hope it works out for me. Today I'm going to talk to you about millennials and technology. And we'll talk about 2 behaviors, 3 trends, and kind of 2 observations that I've had. But first, we have to understand who millennials are. There's obviously a lot of talk about millennials happening everywhere, in the media, among brands, just everyday people judging them. Millennials were born between 1980 and 2000, so they're between 13 and 32 years old. I have to read these. I'm really bad at memorizing. There's 80 million millennials, which makes them the biggest age grouping in America, and that gives them a lot of power as consumers. And that's why part of the conversation is so prevalent around millennials. Millennials worldwide are more similar to each other than any generation that came before them. With the effects of the Great Recession, over 13% of millennials are unemployed. The national average is about 7% right now, and we're not even counting all the millennials who are underemployed, which is significantly higher. But of course, we all know that they're the most educated generation. They have a lot of bachelor's, master's, and PhDs, and because of that, they're the most indebted generation as they leave college and enter the workforce. And they are always connected. I have a colleague who's 25 years old, and she often tells me that the night before she fell asleep while looking at her phone and it crashed into her face, and that's why she has a little bump on her nose. So a lot of you might have seen this article that came out a few months ago in Time magazine, Joel Stein's article about millennials. It was called the Me generation, and it wasn't the most flattering article. So Joel said that millennials are narcissistic, lazy, entitled, selfish, shallow, stunted, and apathetic. He went a little bit further by saying that they exhibit 3 times more instances of narcissistic personality disorder than the baby boomers and Gen Xers. And I found there's actually a lot of debate within the psychology community about narcissistic personality disorder, because as our values change, so does our definition of narcissism. He also said that 40% believe they should be promoted every 2 years. I think I should be promoted every 6 months. More 18 to 29-year-olds live with their parents than with a spouse. And he thinks that's a bad thing. Millennials did not like that, and they took to the internet and Tumblr, and they did what they do best, which is create some memes. The meow, meow, meow generation, the unemployed generation, and the indenture generation. I love that evil mom laughing. What I want to talk about is really essentially that technology has enabled millennials to be a better, more sympathetic, more empathetic, kinder, more giving generation than the generations that came before them. And maybe all of this existed before, probably did, but technology has enabled us to actually activate on all of this and show that we are the kinds of people that Joel Stein doesn't think we are. So I'll start with a little story. A few years ago, I was on Facebook one night, really late at night, and found out that 2 of my friends, they were more acquaintances than close friends, were separating. They were getting a divorce, and they were airing all of their dirty laundry out on Facebook. It was horrifying and totally enthralling. Not long after that, I got married. This is a picture of me on my wedding day. And then a few years after that, last year, I separated from my husband and got a divorce. And one of the first things that I thought of, now, again, because I'm a millennial, most of my friends in my age group are still partnering off and getting married, and a few are having children. None of them have reached, I'm a trailblazer, none of them have gotten divorced yet. In that moment, when I was having this very lonely experience, one of the first things that I remembered was that couple on Facebook. And I didn't remember the horrible things that they said to each other, but I remembered that they went through a divorce, and I wasn't alone. And even though I barely knew them, it made a huge difference to me. And that's kind of what I'm calling voyeur empathy. And in this very kind of disconnected world, or seemingly disconnected world, we are able to relate to each other so much more because we share these very deep, personal, common experiences. And so I might not write on my Twitter account that I'm really sad because my grandmother just died, but when someone else writes it, I can empathize with that, and actually it makes me feel a little bit better. And I think everyone has had a similar experience to this. And that's what I think, all of these platforms enable us to do, is to tell our stories, not just have diary of the mouth, but really tell our stories and relate to one another. Let's see. Taking action. Joel Stein thinks that millennials are lazy. I don't even really need to talk to this slide. The Arab Spring and Barack Obama's first election was a lot of it was the effect of technology and the power it gave millennials. That top picture, I'm not going to be able to speak about everything that's on these slides because I don't have enough time, and this horrible countdown clock is telling me that. But the two guys up there are two of the founders of Warby Parker. So there are all of these amazing startups that have been coming out in the last 5 to 10 years. And we've realized that it's not just about a product, it's not just about a business and one person getting wealthy or one person putting their product or their idea out there. But millennials are really showing that, that they have they understand that they have a footprint, and what they do really affects the rest of the world. And that leads me to my first trend, which is conscious consumerism. The Warby Parker model, which is the one-for-one model that Tom's also has, and also they are very active in their local communities, is just one thing that brands are doing now. Because of social media, again, I think, and the power that millennials have and the fact that they share everything, they've put a lot of pressure on bigger brands and more established brands to do good in the world and to be more transparent about what they do, but they're also starting a lot of really great companies that embrace this model. So for example, the first kind of chart up there is from Everlane. Everlane is a t-shirt, it started out as a t-shirt company, and their model was they weren't going to mark up your t-shirt 6, 7, or 8 times because they were selling directly to consumers. So they thought, well, we don't need to sell it at such a high price, but we're also going to tell our consumers exactly how much it cost us to make that t-shirt. We're going to tell them where it was made, how much the thread that went into it, how much the fabric that went into it was, how much the production was, how much the shipping was, so they know exactly what we're marking up. Very transparent, and it was a very new model. Zadie is a startup that was founded a few months ago by 2 brilliant women in New York City. And Zadie's whole premise is that all the products on their website that you buy, they tell you where it came from and who made it. So there's this amazing Made in America movement, which is a whole other thing, and I'm a huge supporter of. But you can buy products that are not made in America, and you can still be a good, conscious consumer, and Zadie is proving that. They have this amazing, nifty map feature on their website that I highly recommend you guys check out, and you can click on the different parts of the world and see what products came from there, and then read the maker stories. Given Goods, another incredible company. Everything that you buy on the website affects the local community where it was made in one of 3 ways: the one-for-one giving model, a donation, or providing jobs for the local community. The second trend that I want to talk to, I kind of combine these, is crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. In addition to the marketing work that I do and the short stories that I write, I'm also trying to work on a startup. I'm a millennial. So I was talking to my brother, who's a Gen Xer. He's 12 years older than me. And I was telling him, well, I think that to have my samples made, I might do a Kickstarter. And he said, what's Kickstarter? And most of you know what it is, but I explained to him that it's a crowdfunding platform. So I put my idea on there, and then I asked my friends and family to support me by giving me a little bit of money and helping me realize my dream. And he said, oh, so they invest in your company. And I said, no, it's not an investment. I might give them a little gift, but really they're just giving me the money. There are platforms for crowd investing. They're not available in the US yet, but they are available in the UK. And he just was flabbergasted. He was like, well, that's charity. How can you ask people for money and not give them a portion of your business? And I said, well, you're not an early adopter. It never occurred to me that it was a bad thing to ask people to give me money to start a company. But that's because I give other people money to start their companies. I funded so many projects on Kickstarter, so have all of my friends on Indiegogo and a bunch of other websites, because we like to see other people succeed. We like to see great ideas come to life. And I think part of it is also maybe that inherent American dream that we grow up with. We think that if someone else can do it and if we can support them, then if one day we want to do it, maybe someone will support us. And in terms of crowdsourcing, I'm sure all of you have experience with this. You put a question on Facebook, and 100 people respond to it, and it's amazing. You're crowdsourcing an answer, right, on Twitter, on Facebook. An example that I want to talk about is a game called Fold It. So a group of scientists, and I'm not a scientist, so I'm going to just say this as abstractly as possible so I don't make too many mistakes, but they had been working for 10 years to map a protein in the AIDS virus, and they were not able to do it. So one of the scientists created a game and put it online and crowdsourced essentially a solution. So gamers came online and they worked together in 3 weeks to map this protein that it had taken scientists 10 years and no success. The sharing economy and peer-to-peer is the death of ownership. I like buzzwords. So I think that another thing that is different about millennials is that we're not just generous with our time and our money and our social networks, but also with our resources and our possessions. We realize that we can experience more if we own less. So I'm no longer buying music on iTunes. I have Spotify or Rdio. I have a subscription to those services. A friend of mine recently rented a house on Airbnb and invited her parents to stay with her on vacation. And they said, "What, are you crazy? Why would you stay in someone's house? Go to a hotel." And that was interesting because it was such a foreign concept to them. It wasn't just a vacation rental that like they were used to. It was actually someone's house, that person lived in that house, and that house was just vacant for the duration of this vacation. And I'm sure that you guys have heard of a lot of these, but another new company that just launched in Boston and San Francisco that's really interesting is Flight Car. So Flight Car is a concept where instead of going to the airport and paying for parking, you give your car to Flight Car, and they rent it out to someone else. So not only are you not paying for parking, but you're making a little bit of money, and someone else is paying a little bit less than they would with a normal car rental. Okay, good. I've been speeding through this. I thought I wouldn't have time. And so the observations that I have is that, I hear so many people criticize technology and criticize social media and say, it brings out the worst in people. It shows that we're not good. And of course, there's cyberbullying. Of course, there's a lot of horrible things that happen on the internet. But I think we are actually good. And the reason I think this is very narcissistic. I realized recently that I'm not that unique. And if I'm sharing more good things than bad things, then other people are sharing more good things than bad things. There are more double rainbows and pictures of Grumpy Cat on the internet than there are of people being mean to each other, right? And I was thinking, I use Yelp a lot to find reviews to figure out where to go. And I also post reviews, but I do not like to post negative reviews on Yelp. It's not worth my time or energy. I just won't go back to the place if I had a bad experience, but I post a lot of positive reviews. And so I looked it up, and it turns out that 39% of reviews on Yelp are actually 5-star reviews, and 27% are 4-star reviews. That's the majority of reviews on Yelp are actually really positive. Not that many people write horrible reviews. 13% are 1-star, and 8% are 2-star reviews. And then I looked at Reddit. So a lot of the things that go viral actually, I think, originate from Reddit. It's basically kind of like a listserv where people post things and then vote on whether it's interesting enough for other people to see it or not. And the things that get voted get the most votes move up to the top, and that's how they go viral. And in 2012, the most viewed posts on Reddit were an interview with Barack Obama, a post about pictures that make you laugh, and your favorite picture on the whole internet. These are really sweet, lovely things. So in conclusion, 90% of millennials feel it's their responsibility to make the world a better place. That's up 10% from Gen X and baby boomers. 72% of millennials want to create things that people will love. And 75% of millennials say it's important to have a side hustle that could turn into a career, and that's being called sidepreneurship now, which is what I'm doing. So that's it.